college right now. I'm about to get ready to jump into some edutainment. You know what I'm saying? See if I can get this camera view a little bit better. You know, let me see.
I'm the Associate Dean of Liberal Arts and the School of Arts, Design, and Media Arts at SFCC. And I've been here a long time. And so today I'm here to represent PDAC, the President's Diversity Advisory Committee, to introduce our keynote, George Lee Jr. He's Zooming with us today to edutain us on racism. And been doing this for a while. He's got a bachelor's degree in African American Studies, a master's in Human Relations and Adult Higher Ed, along with graduate certificates in Women and Gender Studies, Human Resource and Diversity Development, all from the University of Oklahoma. He also is currently leading the nationally renowned University of Oklahoma debate team on the as the coordinator of policy debate. He's a language arts public high school teacher and a professor at the University of Oklahoma. So he's a busy man, and he's been doing this for 10 years or more, public speaking and leading professional developments on diversity and inclusion for colleges, universities, high schools, and businesses nationwide. But all of that you can read in his bio. What you don't see in his bio, though, is the fact that...
Yeah, I don't mind this. We got a little introduction, man. Y'all prepare to get your socks rocked off. We're going to be getting into... I'm going to have learning objectives at the beginning of this. Right now, it's giving me a cool little introduction.
Yeah, regarding social justice issues. He's been living into his motto, education is elevation. And through his social media handle, The Conscious Lee has amassed a following of over a million followers just on TikTok alone. The first video I ever saw on George, he was talking about trans identity. And as a trans person, I was blown away. I had never seen anybody outside of my community speak so impassionately, authentically, like he got it in a way that I just have never seen that before. And I was impressed. I felt honored and seen.
What up, Goldmine Tribe? What's good,
that
man?
I hadn't outside of my own community in a
About
long
to get
time.
it in.
And I feel like
when I'm not talking trash to people on social media, I'm doing these workshops, facilitations. When I'm not doing workshop facilitations, I'm in the classroom. I'm about to show y'all live and well how I do it. You feel me? I'm juiced up too. You know what I'm saying? It's my second one.
I think of anybody I trust more to do that with. So thank you, George, for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, man. Hey, appreciate you, Shalimar. I hope everybody is very, very excited for what they're about to get into. Before I put this website on, before I put this share screen on, let me close my door real fast, because my wife over there asleep. You know what I'm saying? I'm at the crib. Y'all know how coronavirus kind of shape shifted and did a whole bunch of things, right? We know when it comes to the unconscious consciousness of racism, that coronavirus actually exposed a lot of different things, and maybe I'll figure out a way to contextualize that when I get more into this little workshop, man. But right now I'm about to do a little screen share. I think I'm already screen sharing. Boom. We in there, you know? So right now we're about to get into the unconscious consciousness of racism. My name is George Lee, aka Conscious Lee. Don't forget the Lee. You see at the bottom of the screen right there, you can find me at georgeleespeaks.com for anything you need. You know what I'm saying? I got it for the low. You know what I mean? Before we get into this, though, I like to give a little disclaimer. I got 2 disclaimers, right? Before I get into this, talking about the unconscious consciousness of racism, the first disclaimer I like to give is that I know that I'm going to have a speaking style that's going to be a lot different than what y'all used to. You feel me? When it comes to talking about the unconscious consciousness of racism, it's very important to me that I speak linguistically the way that I've been racialized in America, coming from the socioeconomic background that I come from. What I want to be clear on, I'm not saying that all black people speak the way I speak. However, I do recognize that I speak with a racialized Southern twang that's very important for us to think consciously about race and racism, you know? I try my best to give as much context as possible when I'm throwing out different cultural colloquials or slang or ebonics, whatever they want to call it. But I want to be very clear and acknowledge that, you know what I'm saying, it's very purposeful when talking about the unconscious consciousness of racism, because I want to be clear and making sure y'all understand that race and racism permeates more than skin color. The way that we speak is able to dictate how educated or uneducated we're seen. In just layman's terms, we know that language a lot of times dictates who gets what, when, where, and how, what resources we have access to, and even what type of access we get in general. The second disclaimer is purposeful provocativeness. You feel me? I'm here to keep it real with you. You know what I'm saying? I'm a Southerner. I'm born and raised in Bryan College Station, Texas. And my grandfather always told me, everybody down south tell me, if I can't keep it real with myself, I can't keep it real with nobody else. So purposeful provocativeness, I recognize that I'm going to come off to some people as being provocative. However, I want to let you know that there's a purpose to the provocativeness. You feel me? There's a method to the madness. You know what I'm saying? So just trust me on this. I'm an expert, a professional, that's what we'll call it, and just follow the train of thought. You know what I mean? Last disclaimer. As I mentioned, I'm from Bryan College Station, Texas. I'm a Southerner. You feel me? Specifically, white people. This part of the workshop is to you specifically. You feel me? I'm not here to attack no white people at all. However, I'm not here to make white people feel comfortable in this conversation about racism and race. We will talk about white supremacy and anti-blackness. As a black Southerner, I'm conditioned to always already account for the comfort zone and comfort level of white people. And anytime I start to feel that I'm making white folks feel uncomfortable, I'm conditioned to shut down and or water down what I'm always saying. White people today, I would not be doing that. And to my people of color, you feel me? Whether you indigenous, black, native, Latino, feel free to chime in anytime. Really, anybody feel free to chime in throughout this hour and a half, because I want to make sure that we're getting as much from this as possible. And I know I speak a little fast. You feel me? I have a policy debate background. I'm going to try to speak slow in some instances, and I'm also on my second energy drink. But just finally, this is recognized. This is uncomfortable work. I want to remind you that unsettling the waters of our own racist assumptions is going to be very uncomfortable. Nobody want to see themselves as being the bad person. Some of you may find yourselves bored, annoyed, angry, confused, or possibly encouraged. But discomfort rather than confusion is always going to be a good takeaway, as long as it's clarity, understanding, transparency, and this discomfort or even this anger or what it's about. I want you to embrace the education of discomfort throughout the entirety of this workshop. We got 4 goals, 4 learning objectives today. The first is to workshop around the understanding of racism. The second is to learn from and challenge each other from racism. What I recognize is that we're all coming from different walks of life. We're all coming from different experiences. I have a master's degree in adult and higher education. So I understand the difference between pedagogy is when I'm teaching like children, and andragogy when I'm teaching adults. Adults, what I'm asking you today is to literally filter all of these little mini lecturettes and objectives through your already experiences you've already had. The second is we're going to discuss some race-related specific examples at the university context. And then we're going to speculate about different kinds of strategies, policies, and procedures that y'all can improve at Santa Fe Community College when it comes to, getting into this environment about racism. We know that since the summertime, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, you name it, there's been a lot of dialogue, conversations, feelings, and emotions surrounding racism. I'm hoping that with this workshop of the unconscious consciousness of racism, that I'll give you a better understanding to navigate this reality of racism that we live in. First thing I want y'all to do though, just take out like this 2 minutes. You feel me? Take out a piece of paper, or everybody on their computer, go to like Word document or to notes. You know what I'm saying, or whatever you use, right? And I just want you to write down 3 things. This is gonna be a experiential workshop, meaning it's based on your experiences, based off of how you participate and how you think about it, right? I want to make sure we're starting off with some open, critical thinking, right? On this piece of paper, write down 3 things. Write down your definition of racism. Because when it comes to the unconscious consciousness of racism, shout out to the homie Derek Grace out there in Tampa Bay, Florida. He talks about this concept of unlearning and relearning. Unlearning, relearn, unlearn, relearn. There's a lot of things about racism that we have learned that we have to unlearn and relearn. So these 3 things you're going to be writing down is going to be centered around this concept. The first is, what is your definition of racism? Don't be tempted to go to Google. You feel me? Don't do like my students. You know what I'm saying? I'm asking you for your definition in your own words. How would you define racism? The second is, as it relates to racism, what are the things that you see people doing that you want them to unlearn? And last but certainly not least is, what do you want to unlearn when it comes to racism? I'm gonna give you about 2 minutes just to just write this down, just to get with it, and then we're gonna keep it going. You won't be sharing this with nobody. You feel me? Just put it to the side, and we're gonna keep it rolling. Yeah. Y'all in YouTube world, y'all feel free to go and pull you out a little piece of paper on your phone, or just think about these three things. You know what I'm saying? How you define racism in your own words. What do you want people to unlearn about racism, and what do you want to unlearn about racism yourself, regardless of what race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality you are? Ask this to yourself. Yeah, man. Just give you a few minutes, man. Into Santa Fe, everybody out there in a Zoom world, feel free to interject or ask a question or give a comment at any time throughout this workshop. Throughout any time, I want to just make sure I'm encouraging that.
And because everybody's on mute, I just want to say, if you want to do that, just raise your hand and I'll give you access to
My bad, Charlamar. I ain't know that, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. Or you want to throw a comment out or something, or you want to, or even put in the comment. I just want to make sure. I know I speak a little fast, and I know that I want y'all to be able to take advantage of this opportunity to ask whatever you're gonna ask. You know what I'm saying? Cause it ain't very frequently you're gonna get somebody of my texture that know what I know, that's gonna be able to let you ask what you want to ask without, you know what I'm saying, having any, you know what I'm saying, any prejudgments on you. Don't get me wrong now. If you say something that's a little, I'm be like, But you know, this is a learning environment, a learning climate. You feel me? And when we talk about learning, I want to make sure we have a shared, you know, transparency and willingness to contribute to the conversation. I'm gonna give you about 30 more seconds, and we're gonna keep it rolling. And as a matter of fact, I'm about to get ready to do an activity. So in this activity, if all of y'all would feel free to blow the comment section up figuratively. Figuratively, you heard that, CIA, FBI? That was a figurative. That wasn't like, that was figuratively. Throw a lot of comments in the comment section for this activity. But I'm gonna shut up now and give you about 20 seconds. What's going on, Jamar? Right now, we're talking about the unconscious consciousness of racism. I'm doing a workshop with Santa Fe College, and I'm about to get ready to jump into a stereotypes activity. Y'all feel free to get involved as well over here. So yeah, now put that to the side. Keep that in mind. I'm gonna ask you to pull it back out again, but just to keep it going, right? Right now, we're about to get into what I call the stereotypes activity. If you would have had more time, I would have put y'all in groups and we would have did breakout rooms, or we would have talked about different. I would have assigned each group a demographic, and in that group, you would have been able to talk about the different political, social, economic, historical stereotypes that's associated with that demographic. Because you know what I'm saying, we don't have as much time. I would like for everybody I'm gonna throw out a demographic, and just so we clear, this doesn't reflect on your personal beliefs or opinions or perspectives about this demographic. I'm merely asking you to give what the world has taught you about this particular demographic, right? So if I say like black men, it'll be like black men can rap, black men can dance, black men have a lot of baby mamas, you know what I'm saying? You know, this is kind of thinking about what we have been taught about different demographics throughout the world, right? So So go through 3. See if I can get the comment section up real fast. I can't see the comment section. Yeah, I'll throw out 3. And Shalimar, you can do me a favor and hop in the comment section and just throw them out. So the first one I'm gonna go with is Native American women. Native American women. What has movies, music, news, history taught you about in terms of stereotypes about Native American women?
Wise, care providers, not educated, silent, meek, stoic, all abused, in the background.
Okay. So what if I said what has the world taught you about in terms of stereotypes of Mexican men, Latino men? I'm gonna say Latino men in general. So I'm actually doing 4, not 3.
Macho, capable, good dancers, stealing jobs, machismo, not educated, sexist, hard workers, lazy, gang members.
Okay. Any more?
Yeah, drug dealers, multiple marriages, crazy, illegal, not educated, dominant, manual laborers, good musicians, violent.
Oh, yeah, workers. Okay. What has the world taught y'all about Black women?
Sassy, outspoken, loud, strong, pressed, outspoken, angry and uppity, fighters, over emotional, pushy Black women, tough, strong, beautiful, spiritual, good singers, caretakers, confident, committed, magic, maternal, capable, committed to family, determined, hairstyles.
Hey, and y'all check this out. Y'all peep game. When y'all hearing these stereotypes, I want y'all to be thinking very critically about the stigma or the positivity or negativity they carry and the weight, you know what I'm saying? Like really be thinking about that when you hear this, right? The last one. What has the world taught you in terms of stereotypes about white men?
Educated, powerful, nerdy, running the world, sex offenders, privileged, going fast, selfish and greedy, assholes, Nazis, conservative, fanny pack earring, right wingers, wealthy, white, what? Weak, great fathers, wearing, arrogant, white means prejudice, privileged, delicate, oppressed. Oh, there we go. Oppressed, okay. Judgy, rednecks, serial killers, entitled, self-righteous, entitled, don't have to follow rules, controlling.
We good. We good. I think that we have enough illustrated for me to be able to make point in case now, right? When it comes to unpackaging these stereotypes, there are multiple takeaways that we should have. The first takeaway is that all these stereotypes came from our heads. So whether we believe them or not, they are a part of the background noise and how we've acquired, you know what I'm saying, how we understand these different peoples, right? As somebody that works at the university level, there's always a lot of different international faculty members that I'm able to do these workshops with. And I never ever forget this. I always tell this story. I was doing this stereotypes activity at the University of Oklahoma, and one of the faculty staffs, one of the faculty members just happened to be from Yugoslavia. You feel me? And her group got given the stereotype for African American women, for Black women. And I never forget, she was like, "Hey, Mr. Lee, I don't want to sound ignorant, but I don't know much about Black women in my country except for outside of American movies, except for all the movies y'all making in the States about them, because I don't really know no Black women at all." I was like, well, that's cool. You feel me? Tell me about the stereotypes you've learned about Black women through movies. And a lot of the things y'all said about black women is a lot of the stuff she said. My point in telling y'all this is just literally the takeaway. These stereotypes is in our head. And what I learned from that situation is you don't have no real point of reference for an actual person or something. You will believe about what the world has told you about them. You know what I'm saying? Like for instance, right now I'm born and raised down south. You know, there are a lot of people that have never had real life engagement with people from the Latino community. So they only correlate the things they've heard about from the media when it comes to thinking about people that have Latino identity. They correlate immigration and criminalization with their identity because they don't have no real frame of reference. Now, am I justifying it? Hell no. But am I acknowledging the reality? Yes. You feel me? One of the people that I always felt like really empowered by was by this guy by the name of Huey P. Newton. He's one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party. He said that power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. I'll repeat that. He said that power is the ability to make it act. Power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. The phenomenon that we're attempting to define today is the phenomenon of race and racism. Right now, we're getting into I feel like the more intricacies of how stereotyping and stereotypes kind of perpetuate what we know about race and racism. You know what I'm saying? The second takeaway is that there's usually an element of truth to some stereotypes, all stereotypes. However, they become dangerous because they're usually uncontextualized exaggerations that replace any real knowledge of person or groups. Here goes an example. We know that black people are stereotyped for liking watermelon, for loving watermelon. One of my mottos is research over me search, you feel me? So if you did a little research, you'll find that after Reconstruction or during Reconstruction after slavery, one of the cash crops for African Americans to be able to make some money was to be able to sell watermelon. You feel me? Well, we know how capitalism works is that when black folks start to gain any type of economic progression, it's always followed by a white backlash. You feel me? Though watermelon was a good symbol in terms of black independence, for black people being able to control their means of production and being able to survive, you feel me? It became correlated with them as being like black people love watermelons and here, this, that, and the other, this, that, and the other, and it literally became exaggerated. You know what I'm saying? Or the idea that black people can't read. We know that for 400 years, black people were criminalized for being able to have literacy. And we'll be fools to think that that doesn't have an impact on how black people now in 2021 understand literacy. You know what I'm saying? The third takeaway is that they become the unconscious backdrop if we have no other context for interacting with the larger section of their demographic. That's kind of what I said in number one. But in this sense, though, which I should have been able to peep game, is that when we got to white men, the stereotypes and the advantages to the stereotypes start hitting a little bit different. What I want to be clear in saying is that every demographic has stereotypes. Every demographic has stereotypes. But like in college, the hit song, Meek Mill hit song, is levels to that shit. When it comes to thinking about the idea of stereotypes, it's levels to it, right? And we understood that when it came to hearing about those characteristics and attributes that were associated with white men, white people in general, we seen that it was hit a little different. You know, our first little mini lecture rate about to get into this idea of white privilege, right? And I'm one of those stereotypical millennials. I like memes. You know, another one of my mottos, education is elevation. And I believe in meme education, right? Because, you know, a lot of times right now on social media, it'd be a lot of memes circulating. And I think that meme education is always there, whether it's real information or misinformation. You got to just go research it and see if the information is real or not, and you'll be able to gain education from researching the meme, hence meme education. But I got a meme in this, right? Before I read this meme and show you the meme, go back then. You don't see the meme about white people. Peep game, man. When you hear the concept of white privilege, this does not mean that white folks ain't never struggled. This does not mean you was born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You feel me? White privilege does not mean that you can't experience sexism or classism or ableism or transphobia. You know what I'm saying? White privilege does not mean that you don't struggle. It don't mean you don't go through trials and tribulations. White privilege means you don't go through those trials and tribulations because you are white. Here's my meaning. White privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It means that your skin color isn't one of the things that's making it harder. And the concept of white privilege acknowledges that there are individuals that have a ugly reality because of the skin color that they have, or the influence of one having an ugly reality is based off of and determined by the skin color that they have. I know a lot of times white people are triggered by the concept of white privilege because you think somebody is taking away something from you, or you believe that it means you don't work hard. White privilege does not mean that at all. You feel me? I want to make sure that we have a nice kind of context before I give you the definition of white privilege, because I know a lot of times people get lost in the sauce of their own misunderstanding. The definition of white privilege is the level of societal advantage that comes with being seen as the norm in America, automatically conferred irrespective of wealth, gender, other factors. Regardless, we know that in the system of white supremacy, that white people have higher preference. You know what I'm saying? That's what that means. That means that if we have a particular system or institution that was built and developed, that it was built and developed with particular people in mind that just happen to be white. That means no matter how much you want to get lost in the sauce of 2021 and Joe Biden presidency, and we had Barack Obama's presidency, and Santa Fe College got this black man talking. Listen, the reality of white supremacy is so insidious and complex. We have to have more of these type of talks and lessons to be able to really understand the totality of how it impacts our everyday lives. But you know, this not this one of them workshops, so I'm just gonna throw a term out at you, you feel me? And I don't contextualize it in terms of some real life stuff. You know? Santa Fe Community College, you just happen to be at an institution of higher education. So you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna contextualize, you know what I'm saying, how white privilege impacts the material reality around us with using institutions of higher education. There is a Georgetown study about overrepresentation of whites in elite institutions, right? It said that although African Americans and Hispanics' participation in higher education has been growing faster than white students, the report found that whites are overrepresented in nation's 468 most selective, well-funded colleges, and are increasingly vacating the less selective open access 2 to 4 year colleges, which admit a majority of their applicants. Basically mean they ain't really, you know what I'm saying, the enrollment of white enrollment of like at junior colleges and HBCUs is not at up to par as it is with the elite institutions. On the other hand, we see that African Americans and Hispanic students are concentrated at 3,250 of these open access colleges. But let's add more context to it, right? It makes sense. I mean, let's make this make sense. Well, we know that I feel like if I was, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna ask y'all this. Because y'all able to show me in your little Zoom thing, you can raise your hand, right? If I was to ask you a question, and let's say I was there in person, and we was in the auditorium, and I said, raise your hand if you think that the public education system in America sucks. How many of you would raise your hand? Show me, raise hands. See, hella hands being raised. Everybody's raising their hand. All right? So if I ask the second question, raise your hand if you can acknowledge that all demographics or all races are implicated within public education. How many of you would raise your hands? White people in public education, black people in public education, Hispanic people in public education, Asian, indigenous, you name it, right? You see a lot of people raising their hands as well. This is when we get to start contextualizing white privilege, right? This same report also said that that the country's higher education system does not treat students equally, regardless of their qualifications. You hear that, Justice Clarence Thomas? Regardless of qualifications, multiple studies, you know, they say Ben Shapiro be saying facts over feelings. Well, facts over feelings, regardless of qualifications, although minorities are unprepared for college and whites who are just as unprepared are still presented with more opportunities. What we recognize is that in all elite institutions across America, that everybody, I said, raise your hand if you can acknowledge that the public education school system sucks. Everybody rose their hand. When y'all rose y'all hand, y'all acknowledge that everybody is being impacted by getting a kind of less valued product of education when it comes to getting them to going through public schools. What this Georgetown study is acknowledging is that when you look at still public school enrollment, that white students that come from public schools are still being seen with more opportunities, and you see that black students are literally being marginalized and or not given opportunities based off of stigmas that you're not prepared to go into college because you come from a bad system of public education. So when you think about white privilege in terms of education, I say education is elevation, you know. And speaking of education, just to contextualize this more, I hope we all know that when it comes to how school is funded in America, how you get in your college position, whether you at a junior college, I'm saying, an HBCU, whether you at a five, like literally how you are positioned in your classroom is based off of your property taxes where you was raised at. So if you was raised in a poor neighborhood, you feel me? Right now we're getting intersectionality. I'm getting into intersectionality a little later. It's gonna be a definition, but right now I'm just giving an intersectional analysis about how white privilege operates. We know that even though I'm talking about economics, there is no, we know that it's not a coincidence that areas that are predominantly black and brown tend to be poor. So we know that when it comes to school funding, schools are funded based off of property taxes. So if you live in an area with low property taxes, there's going to be a direct correlation with low school funding. So when I talk about white privilege being in education, you have to recognize that in America, we say that education is the great equalizer. At the same time, recognizing how for some people, education is criminalization. Shout out to the school to prison pipeline. I feel like I'm working in the hallway of it right now. In my public schools I'm working in right now. We know that when it comes to mass shootings, I work at a school that's predominantly black and brown in the inner city, and my students have to get through a metal detector to get into my 9th and 10th grade English class. Data shows that it is unlikely for a mass violence or a mass shooting to happen at this school that's predominantly black and brown. White privilege is being able to go unsuspected, therefore going undetected, therefore going unpunished. I don't know too many white suburban schools that force their student population to go through a metal detector to get into the classroom. I know typically when conversations of white privilege happen, though, it's followed by white fragility. If you want to learn more about white fragility, or you want to have a more, I feel like, understanding to have conversations about race and racism, particularly with white people, shout out to this white person, Robin DiAngelo. The book is called White Fragility and Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Here's a quote. White people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress. This insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort, while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress. A lot of the knee-jerk defensive reactions that when you hear white privilege about how, hey man, my parents worked this much, or I worked hard too, or I struggled too. All of those are manifestations of white fragility. When I talk about being conditioned and making it where when I'm talking to white people and about dialogue about race and racism, I'm conditioned to account for how if I'm making white folks comfortable or not. That's me being conditioned to recognize that in my position, I have to always be conscious of white fragility. Because white fragility can get me killed, locked up, beat up, lost resources. Some of y'all might be asking yourself, man, what the hell is white fragility? Can you give me an actual definition? Because you're talking real abstract, right? White fragility is defined as a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include outward display of emotions such as fear and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving stress-inducing situations. White privilege usually triggers white fragility. And a lot of us are not conscious about how we can be seduced by white fragility. In a conversation about white privilege and trying to contextualize and account for white fragility, The privilege of white fragility is recognizing that you can express your white fragility for temporary gratitude, for egotistical reasons, to make yourself feel good in that moment. And there might be everlasting impacts on a person of color for how you chose to get your expressions off when it came to being, showing your white fragility. It's not just some liberal term that can be thrown around. It's like those Democrats are always making up terms, you feel me? For my people that's more right-leaning, you feel me? I want to be clear when I say this. Racism is not a bipartisan issue. Racism is a systemic issue. Nothing I'm saying is an endorsement of the left or the right, because both of them is implicated in the disenfranchisement of people of color, especially when it comes to black people. So when you hear this terminology, specifically my conservative friends, don't jump to convolute this and correlate this into some of your political opposition beefs where you're able to write off and ignore what I'm saying because it's some liberal democratic mumbo jumbo. That's what you believe. Don't do that. We ain't here to do that. It don't make no sense. You feel me? Democrats are implicated in mass incarceration. Republicans are implicated in mass incarceration. Democrats are implicated in the racialization of immigration. Republicans are implicated in the racialization of immigration. Let's not try to make it where we believe that one party has cornered the market on being racist or resisting racism, because that's how we kind of, that's not a good conscious, unconscious of racism. You know what I'm saying? That's like more racial illiteracy. That shows that you have no understanding to when it comes to reading and writing situations of race and racism. You feel me? You go quote though, Let me know too, man. Let me know if you got some questions, comments, concerns throughout this, right? Because I know a lot of
We had an interesting comment.
Yeah.
This is interesting because it helps us understand the reactions of the so-called Karens.
Yeah, man. Hey, Karen is a American product that has made it where white feminists have to also really be critical about intersectionality, because we see that Karen is kind of the duplicity of oppressed and oppressor. You know what I'm saying? Like when white women are able to use their position and being perceived as being oppressed and being able to weaponize that against people of color, especially black people, that to me is how Karen is born. You feel me? The idea that white women, you know how patriarchy is, you feel me? White supremacy and patriarchy make it like, you feel me? We have to always go save the white women regardless. You feel me? And we know that individual white women can recognize the climate of this and the position of this and use it to their benefits. You know what I'm saying? So definitely trying to make sure, Huey P. Newton, I'm trying to make it where we can define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. You know what I'm saying? The unconscious consciousness of racism, that's what that's about. You feel me? Being able to think about politically, socially, economically, you feel me? In terms of ability. We know that people that, in the disabled community that are racialized compared to not being racialized, we see that there is a different understanding to access, resources, ability, and legitimacy. You know what I'm saying? We see that, when we talk about, mental health in this country one way, for particular people, it can be justified and rationalized for a whole bunch of foolishness, making it where if you have mental health, you might commit a mass crime. You feel me? But on the other end, you know what I'm saying, in the hood like mine, you ain't no benefit of the doubt from law enforcement or American media when it comes to dealing with, mental health. But let's get into this Joe Kinchili quote. It says, to understand racial identity formation, we need to appreciate the way white is discursively represented as the polar opposite of black, a reflection of the Western tendency to privilege one concept and a binary opposition to another. The darkness, light, angel, devil discursive binary, like other discursive constructions, has reproduced itself in the establishment of racial ethnic categories. Simplistically, we know that the Western world is built off of what I learned in philosophy is called the Aristotelian binary logic. This is the logic of when you define something as far in opposition as something else is possible. You feel me? So it's like what it means to be up is defined in opposition to what it means to be down. You feel me? What it means to be hot is defined in opposition to what it means to be cold. What it means to be white is defined in opposition of what it means to be black. Having this understanding of, this here binary is gonna be real key. You feel me? But it's how I drop one of the other little quotes. Y'all know last month was Black History Month, but for some of us, Black history is 365, right? Stokely Carmichael, he was one of the co-founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee during the Civil Rights Movement. He had this quote, you feel me? He said, if the white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If the white man has the power to lynch me, that is my problem. When it comes to the conversation of racism, a lot of folks be lost in the sauce of their feelings and their emotions, and they don't recognize that this is about power. He said, if the white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If the white man has the power to lynch me, that is my problem. To unlearn racism in this country requires us to check the question of white privilege. Any question of racism needs to include how the binary ideas of superiority and inferiority are used to construct racial designations and their relations to power. It's easy for a lot of us to sit around and think about oppression, but we don't want to think about the power that's birthed out of that oppression, or if you want to talk about the chicken and the egg, whatever. Regardless, we know that these two are inextricably tied together. Going to the Aristotelian binary logic, you can't want to always talk about racial disadvantage without talking about racial advantage. Let that marinate, you know what I mean? Let that marinate. This is what we know though. The white-black binary. Since the Western system works by placing positivity and establishing in itself an identity on the value of white, it structures its primary opposition negatively on the level of black. This is what I learned as being anti-blackness and how the entire world, there's 7 continents in the world, right? I'm finna make one of them provocative claims. The entire world is anti-black. This means the entire world is structured by the hierarchy of white over black, light over dark. White over black, light over dark. That is a cross-cultural hierarchy that can be applied to the continent of Africa, the continent of South America, the indigenous community, the Asian community, the black community, the white-black binary, light skin over dark skin, white over black. This is a global phenomenon. Or to put it in racial opposition, in reference to this anti-black world, it's 2 principles, right? It is best to be white and it is worse to be black. Or to put it in multicultural terms, it is best to be white, but at all costs, avoid being black. At the core, a textbook definition of anti-blackness is wanting to distance oneself from blackness and black people. The desire to distance oneself from blackness and black people. That is one of the textbook definitions of anti-blackness. In this conversation of power and racism, has to have one that situates and accounts for anti-blackness, and how anti-blackness is at the core of what's at racism, and how this white-black binary can be applied cross-cultural, cross-continents throughout history. And recognize that when it comes to the unconscious consciousness of racism, there's ways in which we inherently place value on how we tend to either color things or racialize things. You know what I'm saying? Reminds me of that old Muhammad Ali video where he goes off about white angels and devil cake and white lie and blackmail, and the white cat is this, but the black cat is this. And that's a part of this Aristotelian binary logic, or how some philosophers would say is modernity. You feel me? And how in the Enlightenment time, we started to associate positivity and purity with whiteness and devilish and, demonic things and negativity with blackness. And literally start to make it where we start playing these games of lightness, darkness, and we start to attribute inherent value to it. That's why I'm having this philosophical conversation about Aristotelian binary logic and the white-black binary. And of course, I'm a debater, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to just, flex a little bit on my philosophical understanding of racism, because to me, it matters. you know. But this leads us into this like a little mini little accounting for colorblindness. Cause you know, some of us can be so lost in the sauce of not wanting to be seen as a bad person that we think that if we deploy colorblindness, this is a great answer to racism. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't gonna read all this, I'm gonna read the first 2 bullet points for you, but I want to just make sure, you know, that just because, you know what I'm saying, you are trying to deploy colorblindness when it comes to understanding racism, it doesn't mean that the reality isn't there because you're being ableist and choosing not to see something. You feel me? I think that in the conversation about anti-blackness and the conversation about the unconscious consciousness of racism, it's time for us to start thinking about how ableist the concept of colorblindness is, especially when you correlate colorblindness to racism, because you got to recognize that there are people that are actually colorblind. And even if you say you colorblind, you see black and white. That's literally what colorblindness means. You feel me? You see black and white. So not only are you being ableist, you feel me? It don't even make no sense. Many Americans view colorblindness as helpful to people of color by a certain race doesn't matter. Colorblindness creates a society that denies their negative racial experiences, rejects the cultural heritage, and invalidates their unique perspectives. Whether you choose to see me as black or not, I'm still 3 times more likely of being arrested because I am black. Regardless whether you want to see my race or not, I'm still more likely to being convicted of a crime because I am black. So when you want to pick and choose what you see a part of my identity and you feel like because you're choosing to ignore this part of my identity, it don't mean it still don't implicate to my reality because that's still part of my identity. I hope that we understand that colorblindness, you feel me, is not the answer. You know what I'm saying? And this to conclude this little point about colorblindness, man. My grandfather used to always say, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. The pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. I acknowledge that. I get it, right? I acknowledge that a lot of people have positive, good intentions when it comes to being colorblind. But the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions. And this don't mean your good intentions don't lead to bad results. This means no matter how much you want to be an ally or an accomplice, you have to be always be willing to be conscious with yourself and recognize that no matter how, you feel me, much of a solidarity you want to be with Native people, with Mexican people, with whoever, you have to recognize you still can get in the way of their progression. Now I see the Q&A. Now I can see it. Now I can see it. Now I can see it. Okay. All right, we good. We good. We good. We good. Making sure I give y'all, I guess, a cooler definition of racism. I know that I feel like now I've never thought about this while doing this workshop, but I think about it now. This slide is not supposed to be provocative, but I recognize now how politically charged the definition of racism has become. I feel like it's actually always been that way. I just think that some people was really lost in the sauce of objectivity and neutrality when it came to the definition of racism and believing that anybody can be racist. And it's just like when you think about systems of power, they're always built off of exclusivity. That literally is what makes it a system of power. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, I know that this definition of racism comes off as provocative to some people because they believe that it is change the definition of racism. And I think that if you believe that, I challenge you to do some research and understand the etymology of the word racism and understand, you feel me, how this concept came about, you know. Without further ado though, racism 101, right? Before I get to racism equaling prejudice plus power, power equals access to resources and participation in society. Prejudice equals beliefs, attitudes, and actions based off of stereotypes. Remember, Stokely Carmichael said, if the white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If the white man has the power to lynch me, that's my problem. In this little quote right here, we're recognizing that prejudice is literally that: attitudes, beliefs, and actions. But prejudice ain't gonna, you know what I'm saying? It's not prejudice alone that put him on, you know what I'm saying, that wants to hang him or that gets him hung. It's the power to do it. Which brings us to this: racism equals power plus prejudice. Or racism equals racial prejudice plus institutional and systemic power to dominate, exclude, discriminate against, or abuse targeted groups of people based on race. And this is how I like to conclude this like little definition of racism and thinking about racism one-on-one, right? This layman's terms. I know I got I'm sorry, Santa Fe Community College. I know y'all got, I feel like Charlotte Moore told me, one of the big dogs in here today. But listen, I apologize. This is lame. This is the best way I feel like for me to explain this. You know what I'm saying? But listen, my grandfather always said that everybody got an asshole and they always stink. They usually stink. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right? He actually said that opinions are like assholes and they usually stink. What I'm bringing this up for is thinking about how assholes or idiots are in every group. They come in every shape, color, political affiliation, gender, sexuality, come in all shapes, colors, and sizes, right? The difference is when you have an institution or a system to bag you up or enforce you in being an asshole. Just to make sure we're clear. Being an asshole comes in all shapes, colors, sizes, political affiliations, genders, all that, right? The difference is when you have a system or an institution to back you up or enforce you in being an asshole. When it comes to thinking about the unconscious consciousness of racism, it is being able to think about how the individual understanding about how oppression works is always enforced by a system or institution that reinforces one's individual prejudice, quote unquote, right? To me, it would be unethical to say that a Jewish person that was in the Holocaust was racist towards a Nazi German because they had a prejudice or a belief or attitude against that Nazi German person that they believed they were devalued because of how they were treating them as Jews, right? For some reason, people suspend this logic of morals and ethics when it comes to thinking about how white people and black people are positioned together, or thinking about how indigenous people and white people are positioned together. Or we get to have this idea of saying, well, if you made me feel uncomfortable about the kinship of being white, then you being racist to me. Or here in my state of Oklahoma, we had a 7th grade teacher in Edmond accuse a young black 7th grader of being racist because he wore a Black is King shirt, and berated this young black man in front of the entire class and said, what if I wore, it's a teacher now, said, what if I wore a shirt that said, white woman is queen? And why don't white people have a White History Month? The position of power that you have to actualize your beliefs or desires, when it comes to the unconscious consciousness of racism, always keep that in mind. Shalimar told me y'all gonna be having like a little like debriefing after this. You know what I'm saying? Where y'all gonna be kind of having a conversation of what's going on at y'all university. I think that just to help y'all with that conversation, just to help guide it a little bit, facilitate that a little bit. When y'all had this conversation, I think y'all should have this conversation structured around the 4 I's of oppression. I think that you should break up your group into 4 different groups, and you should give each group one of these I's of oppression, right? Yeah, ideological. That's our thinking about the specific groups. We got interpersonal. You feel me? That's how, name calling, verbal abuse, or how, some people clutch their person in the elevator when other people are, walking to the elevator. You feel me? We have the internalized understandings of oppression. That's like, it could be drug abuse, alcoholism, self-harming, mental health, low expectation, imposter syndrome, you name it. And then we also have our institutional instances of oppression. That's the policies, the procedures, the laws, such as criminal, you know what I'm saying, criminal justice, you feel me? You know what I'm saying? How y'all, you know, your enrollment policies. When y'all having this group conversation and y'all digesting everything that consciously, joyously, and dropped on you in this conversation about racism, y'all should have a real life conversation about how your community college is implicated in this specific op, right? So it's say, you know what I'm saying? So I got Megan and Lisa. Let's say Megan and Lisa in the same group. Let's say that group is, you know what I'm saying, internalized depression. They're going to sit around and think about the examples that they've seen on your campus of internalized oppression, and y'all gonna have a conversation about what y'all can do about it. Methods, strategies, policies that could be developed or you know what I'm saying, curated to deal with the problems y'all identify in this group. You feel me? Y'all are the people on y'all campus that's passionate about diversity and inclusion on your university. You feel me? So before you pat your back, what can you do? What are you doing? When y'all had this conversation, you should structure this conversation around the 4 hours of oppression. Shalimar, you can go to Google and look. Actually, I can send you a document that has more in depth these 4 hours of oppression that can help structure and help y'all in this conversation. You know what I'm saying? This paper also accounts for the idea of reverse racism. And I feel like it's self-explanatory on the paper. So, you know what I'm saying? I send that to you, Shalimar. You had that. But yeah, you know.
Thank you. That would be great.
Yeah.
I will ask everybody to start thinking about those things as
Yeah.
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, y'all should really think about, you feel me, having a crucial, uncomfortable conversation about what your alumni, about what your current students, current staff, current faculty of color is saying about, you know what I'm saying, Santa Fe Community College. You know what I'm saying? Like what it like really digging into the nitty-gritty, you know? And to the administrators, be prepared to hear some things you don't want to hear. Be prepared to look at, you know what I'm saying, your baby as in your, you know what I'm saying, your campus a little bit differently, you feel me? Because sometimes us as parents, you feel me, we don't want to see our kids the way, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like as administrators, you feel me, the campus, not the people in the campus, but the mere campus and how it is ran, that's your child. So administrators, when you are part of this conversation, be prepared to look at your campus a little bit different. And regardless of your color, I know that as an administrator, I have a master's degree in adult and higher education. I know as an administrator, we're conditioned to have an investment on how the campus is running and the perception of the campus. The reason why I'm accounting for this is because some people might have a knee-jerk reaction or be a little defensive to hearing about how y'all campus is lost in the sauce and racism and white supremacy and anti-blackness and xenophobia, and you feel me? We can keep on naming stuff. Be prepared though to before you react, listen to understand before you reply. Whether you're a provost, a dean, whether you you know what I'm saying, the staff, you know, whatever. You think of the title. I can't think of the titles right now. My energy drink is hidden. You know what I'm saying? But just be prepared to have an uncomfortable conversation and be prepared to hear some things or ask some questions that you might not want to hear the answers to. Because like I started this workshop and talking about how I'm conditioned to always account for the comfort level and comfort zone of whiteness and white people. It's not just my community, it's communities of color writ large. And how we're conditioned when we go to a place of higher education, we're trying to better ourselves. So we talk to almost, you know what I'm saying, close our mouth and look the other way. Because this is a practice that's been going on for centuries, there's a lot of things that's been normalized within our society, especially when it comes to higher education, you know? And before I jump into this conversation about intersectionality, you know what I'm saying? It's one of peep game. Do not mistake correlation for causation in terms of naturalization and normalization. I ain't mean that to rhyme, but the rap album coming soon. It's a joke, but don't listen to that. But listen though, a lot of people sometimes correlate or sometimes misdiagnose what has been normalized as being what is natural. And a lot of times when it comes to the reality of racism, we tend to want to naturalize things that's been normalized for how we're supposed to just deal with and or take or settle with racist stuff. The last thing I'm gonna say on this slide, man, is that I know, you feel me, like indigenous peoples are uniquely impacted by not only the university that I work at, but the university that y'all at. You feel me? And I think when you talk about race and racism, I know that there is a hyper visibility to focus on the white black binary, and sometimes a hyper invisibility to think about indigeneity and like settler colonialism. I want y'all to be also critical about when you think about race and racism and the unconscious conscience of racism, for you to also account for settler colonialism and how killing the savage and saving the man is, you know what I'm saying, part of American foundation. You feel me? The idea of manifest destiny being able to spread from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that's a settler colonial idea that was able to literally dehumanize indigenous people that justify stealing their land, taking their land, selling their land. I'm an alumni of the University of Oklahoma. I work at the University of Oklahoma. I like being there. It's taught me a lot about myself and a lot about the world. I'm not going to use that to justify settler colonialism that make the university present, though, that make it possible. I'm not going to gloss over or erase that indigenous death, that indigenous violence. You feel me? So when you're thinking about race and racism and power and resources and, you know what I'm saying, accessibility and history and all that, just make sure you're trying to have as much of a well-rounded analysis as possible. Intersectionality. At schools across the country, from the Missouri to Ithaca College to Stanford, students of color are showing they feel disconnected to their irrespective schools. But yet, implicit institutionalized racism creates emotional distance between them and their white peers and faculty. Now, what I'm not saying is that all people of color go through mental health, you feel me, emergencies that go to predominantly white institutions. I'm not saying that. What I am saying that there is a high prevalence of emotional distance that people of color have at predominantly white institutions. And it's going further. Being a non-white student, predominantly at a white campus, certainly doesn't guarantee that a student is going to develop mental health issues. However, various studies suggest that perceived or actual discrimination can make it hard for students of color to engage with their campus and with their white peers. If you are really invested on getting your degree, or if you're really invested on making sure other people get their degrees, really think about this here slide and how discrimination literally impacts the desire to be inside the classroom, the desire to go sign up for them classes, the desire to take 12 classes, decide, you know what I'm saying, to correct the 15. You feel me? And before I give you a definition of intersectionality, you see we got a nice little visual on the screen when it comes to thinking about intersectionality. We see we have a stick figure in the middle of an intersection. We see on this intersection, we have a BLM flag, we have an LGBTQ flag, and we have a feminist flag. The person in the middle, let's say that represents a black trans woman. Intersectionality is recognizing that this person is not just racialized, but they have other things that go along with their, you know what I'm saying, that other attributes that can be shown on how they identify themselves. They're trans, they're black, and they're woman. A lot of times when we think about race and racism, we think about it through a extreme heteronormative lens. That means that we normalize heterosexuality and we only see racism insofar how it impacts heterosexual people. What that does is it perpetuates or allows for more violence to be created against the non-straight black people that exist, that have been alive and well and thriving since the beginning of time, just like all the rest of us black folks have, right? Intersectionality explained. Shout out to the OG, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. You know what I'm saying? She the person that coined the person that's given credit for coining the term intersectionality. She is a UCLA professor of law. She says that intersectionality is the lens through which you can see where power comes and collides, where it interlocks and where it intersects. It's not simply there's a race problem here or a gender problem here or class or LGBTQ problem there. Many times that framework erases what happens to people who are subject to all of those things. When I talk about how race is inscribed in language, linguistics, rhetoric, that is also that is an intersectional analysis about how particular Black people that come from certain classes are devalued for the ways that we speak. And the literal usage of ebonics and slang make us seem as being less intellectual, less educated, less knowledgeable, less being able to put your words and thoughts together. That is a part of the consciousness of racism, where you're able to demonize African American vernacular insofar that Black folks are using it. But as soon as enough people in the white mainstream start to see legitimacy in the way that Black people speak, it gets integrated into mainstream popular culture, and it is no longer seen as being some ignorant nigga shit. Intersectionality. The understanding of how different systems and institutions come and collide and intersect. See my fingers over here? Over here? Intersect. That's really how our world works. Feel me? About to get ready to get into a little Q&A. You know what I'm saying? OG Audre Lorde. She's one of the pioneers, one of the most influential people. I feel like in the group of the most influential people in terms of African American literature. And I feel like Audre Lorde had a big impact too in like feminist and women's literature as well. She says there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. She said there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. So just let me set this up, right? So raise your hand if your definition of racism changed from the beginning of this workshop. If I was to ask you to write your definition of racism now, would it change? If it would change, can you please give me a raised hand? If your definition of racism has changed throughout this. Damn it, what I love to see. I'm happy. My purpose and goal, you know what I'm saying? Like my social media name is to raise consciousness. I know a lot of us are conditioned to not account for how power is a part of racism. I'm willing to bet that most of y'all that raised y'all hand did not have the word power in your definition of racism. One of the major takeaways from this is that when you think about racism, you always account for power. And how power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. And hoping that through this workshop, the unconscious consciousness of racism, I've given you some language, some history, some context, and being able to define this phenomenon of racism a little bit better. Because peep game, the fabric of racism is inextricably woven and constructed into the founding principles of the United States. I know that there are different laws and legislation right now that the Trump administration was attempting to pass. And then maybe the Biden administration might go on and keep on the books that says that me making this statement, the fabric of racism is inextricably woven into the woven and constructed into the founding principles of the United States. It's something that's going to be maybe outlawed or maybe they become criminalized. You know what I'm saying? White fragility is real. But we know that racism was done and it can be undone through effective anti-racist organizing. And like Derek Gray said, you feel me? We got to unlearn, relearn, unlearn, relearn. You know what I'm saying? Like unlearn, relearn. When it comes to racism, we have to wake up every day and be willing to think about what am I trying to unlearn about racism today? How am I willing to learn how I'm implicated within racism today? It's not an action, it's a process, a daily process. It's a process that sometimes becomes tiring. Sometimes you can get fatigued. Sometimes you can, you know what I'm saying, want to throw a towel in. It's one that you should always keep your mental in check because it's an ongoing battle and process that literally has sometimes a heavy impact on your mental. Man, we got 20 minutes left. I want to purposely make sure I give you some time for Q&A. Let's see. How do I stop doing them? I'm trying to stop the yeah, I'm trying to stop the share. But yeah, help me out. But yeah, shout out to everybody on YouTube. Shout out to everybody at Santa Fe. Man, we here. We ready, man. Oh yeah. I'm open for questions. GeorgeLeeSpeaks.com. If you looking for me, I feel like if you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed how I speak, if you enjoy how I present things, The Conscious Lee on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you know what I'm saying? Hey, and to my ALS interpreter, hey, let the person know I keep my closed captions on. You feel me? Like my clothes, I try to make sure I try to make sure that my content is accessible because accessibility is key. I really believe that education is elevation. The Conscious Lee, TheConsciousLee. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Holla at your boy. Rock with me. I'm real. Open for Q&A.